So I'm going to be a pacer, and then we've got an hour or less than an hour. So and I don't have time to have you introduce yourself, but this is both an introspective conversation, so I want you to be thinking a lot, but also be sharing with your table. And then you'll get the slides, and we're going to video this, and you can have the video too. I do a lot of hiring of project managers for a lot of companies, and sometimes I do some firing of project managers. And I typically, when I fire a PM, it's typically not because of competence, it's because they're lying. So, they're lying. Yeah, so I tend to be blunt too, so I might hurt your feelings. I want to go through that because there's some myths about project management, and one is that project managers are always supposed to keep projects on schedule and on budget. And if I'm running multiple projects, I can set up a Ponzi scheme, and I can make it all work out. Okay, so we're also going to talk like real stuff, because some of you look like you have some age on you, or experience. Okay? And sometimes that experience, we kind of sell our soul along the way. So what I find throughout your career is, to me, the older I get, the more I value my integrity. And the more other people do too. So that's what we want to kind of theme this today. And I'd like you to look at, periodically you need to check in on your reputation versus your myth. And the more that these two align, the better. So again, today will be a thoughtful day. So topics are your skills, your principles, your reputation with your customers, management, your peers, your team. So again, you've got relationships with typically 4 different sets of people. And how do you work within that? And again, you'll get all the slides. So we'll start with that. And then what you want to take away from it. How do you really move forward? And it's baby steps, but every day is, I'll say, a new day within the project. So won't go into the basics, but I will go into the foundation project, and I use lots of metaphors, and you should too as a PM. So I find that when we get into how do you manage your customers, there's a lot of customers who are ignorant about what a project is and what it isn't. Okay. But this is a pyramid, which is different than a triangle. And the myth is that all these sides are hard. And many of you work in operational organizations where operations are all past-based, past and present-based. Projects are all future-based. And yet some of you will have bosses who think that because they said do this by this time, by this budget, that it's true. And no, it's a dream. So let me ask, is a project fact or fiction? It's an easy question. You could only get it half wrong. So, what is it? It's fiction. It's made up. It's not fantasy hope. I mean, we hope anyway. But a project's not a fact until it's over. Does that make sense? Because a project's future-based. And so, but oftentimes, us and our management think that it's a fact. And then we try and make life fit into that fact. So again, I'm going to turn some of you on your head today. We'll come in on some different angles. But real quick, just the thing we often forget in projects is this top words, purpose or value. Why are we here? Why is this project here? Who are we serving? How will we measure the results? So projects never deliver the purpose. Projects deliver the potential for the purpose. And especially for those of you who are internal people doing internal change projects. How many of you know people who have great cookbooks and great pots and pans and still go out to dinner because they can't cook? So what we deliver has to be you. And so this, and the purpose really needs to be the Pledge of Allegiance every time you walk into the room. This is why we're here. And I'll walk around projects in multiple companies, and team members will go, why are we doing this? Have any of you ever been asked that? And then oftentimes, we still have John Wayne in America, even though he's passed away. But many of us just say, shut up, go do work, be highly motivated. So you always got to know why, because that's our frame of reference. That's how we make decisions. And then we'll get into scope, time, cost, quality. I won't walk through, but scope is what we're building, but also what we're not building. And oftentimes your job is to lay out what we're not building. Quality, how good is it versus not good? I tend to use the word standard instead of quality. Quality has a very weird connotation to it as a judgmental conversation, especially in the US now. We expect quality for free, and that's your job. I mean, how many of you have been heroic in the past? How many of you we're in Chicago, passive aggressive Midwest. I live here. So how many of you remember being heroes? How many of you are just tired now? Or martyrs. So we tend to think that that's the PM's job. We'll walk more into that. But the goal is that I'm always managing the structure of this pyramid versus the hardness of the pyramid. The pyramid has to flex. So it not only has to flex, but it has to change. But the myth is that a pyramid's hard. Now I need a volunteer who drives to work every day for a while. Not every day, 5 days a week, 4 days a week. Anybody want to volunteer? Yes, ma'am. How long have you been doing it from your house to work? Same house, same work.
Well, different work, but the same work?
Yeah, same work.
Same work. Well, I just recently started months ago.
All right, let's go back.
It'll be even further?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same, we'll say same areas for 8 to 10 years.
All right. 8 years. 1,600 times. Okay. How long does it take you to get to work? Driving? Time.
An hour, 10,
Okay. Every day?
every day,
Every day?
every day.
Really? Not an hour 5? You've never done it in an hour 5?
Let's see, when there's nobody else on the road, possibly.
So the other thing to think about is that project management's about yes/no answers. Is the wall up? Well, we're working on it. That'd be called no. God, you're mean. So the wall is up. Well, no, it's not. Well, then just say no. Have you ever taken an hour and a half?
Yes.
So it's not an hour 10 every day. So what's your range? And I'm not being mean. I'm just.
Okay. My range could be an hour, 5.
Okay. So if we're gonna make this project predictable, what number should we give? An hour 15, okay, or an hour 10, or an hour 5. So what I'd like you to think about is we often spend a whole lot of time on projects arguing about time, but just look at what she's done, 1,600 times. Is that an operation or a project? That's an operation. And she's got 50% variance in there, depending on how you want to do your math. She's got 50% variance in an operation. Many of you are working on projects that have never been done before, or have a whole bunch of uniqueness in them, and you have a 5% contingency, or you have a 5% buffer. That's just crazy. You have to estimate to a range, and that range then is based on assumptions. I'm not going to get into training you too much, but the goal is that this pyramid changes anytime the assumption changes. And then the pyramid has to have flexibility. So flexibility is variance, change is change. And I'm just encouraging you as a PM, are you educating up that conversation? Or are you holding to the myth that the pyramid is hard and you'll make magic happen? And how we mostly make magic happen is we pour quality out the end, and then we just deliver on time. How many of you have people who inherit your projects? How many of you have people who fix the inherited projects? But that's cool, because we close the job number. So it's all good. Yes, ma'am.
What do you suggest then to our stakeholders, because our stakeholders are always wanting a time and also.
Based on the assumptions. You can never put a date or a budget without assumptions. And what we normally do is we put dates. I mean, I go in and look at schedules, and I work with hundreds of companies, and there's a schedule. And many of you are going to be in a matrix environment. And yet we don't have our resource managers sign our schedules. You don't own the schedule. You own the dependencies of the activities. But you don't, project managers in a matrix environment don't own the timeline. Does that make sense? I'm not making, again, being mean, I'm being blunt. But I've got to have my resource managers sign off on the schedules, and then I have to have assumptions. Ma'am, what was my driver's name? What was your first name?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Darling. So if it's, and assumptions are sunny day, you know, I leave at 6, it'll be an hour 5. So and I'll just say never go with one date, go with three. Have them pick. But when you pick it, pick up the assumptions. Make sense? Because projects live in a three-column world. Optimistic, most likely pessimistic. And it's not that I'm being optimistic, most likely, or pessimistic, it's because the assumptions are optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic. And if you only come with one scenario, you're starting to portray the truth. That it's true, that it's factual. When you come with three, you're at least saying, guys, it's going to happen in the future. Okay. Does that make sense? That help? Okay. And a lot of times we just say, yeah. Or they say, can we do it by May 10th? And we go into whatever tool we're using, and there's way too many tools now. We'll say Microsoft project. We go in there and we put May 10th in the schedule, and we plan back to miraculously today. We print it out and we hold it out here because it's toxic. And actually kind of stupid. And they go, that's awesome. And we go, yeah, it is. They go, can you do it by April 10th? Yeah, let me go draw another painting. So again, I'm thinking that none of you would be doing that. Okay. Remember, we'll get into professionalism. They're not buying painted schedules. So the goal here is just which is most important. So in any conversation with your managers and stakeholders, which is most important, because they cannot all be number one. Which means that sometimes it's money, in which case one of the other four have to move. So, and I already forgot your name. Barbara. Darlene, thank you. I said I forgot it. I did forget it. So Darlene, is time most important, or is getting to work most important? Getting to work, right. So if you drove an hour, 10 minutes, and you weren't there yet, would you just stop? Oh, that'd be weird. Right. If you said an hour 10 and you got there in an hour 5, do you sit in your car for 5? No, that'd be weird. What I find is a lot of people act very rationally before they get to work. And then at work, we throw away all the rules and we just paint pretty pictures. Again, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to some of the people at your table. Which is easiest to measure? The two easiest / worst measures on a project manager is, are you on budget and are you on time? Those are the worst two, because then we can say yes and then make things happen. What's your purpose? Your purpose is to manage the flexibility of that pyramid. And your purpose is to deliver the purpose. And if we don't know the purpose or forget the purpose, and then going back to stakeholders, always start your conversation with your stakeholders with the purpose. The purpose of this project is X, and this is where we're at. Because many of your customers forget why they're doing what they're doing. How many of you are internal people and you've been on, let's just say, you've been on the same or similar project 3, 6, 8 times, but we rename it after the third because it's just embarrassing? Yeah, that makes us proud. So it's about achievement of that purpose, and it's about achievement of running that project. Again, not perfectly, but well. The goal is that the points always touch, not that the sides are hard. That makes sense. And that's your job. Now, how do we manage that job? And I won't go through this slide in detail because you all know it. And oftentimes we make it way more complicated. We've added PMO into the conversation now, so let's really complicate life. But this is just a generic project life cycle, and every step along the way ought to have some document, which doesn't mean 50 pages. But anytime I see a document that the PM fills out by themselves, we ought to throw that document away. Because we didn't communicate, and we didn't converse with people, we just filled out something. And some of you have people who come in, monitor how much your documentation is filled out versus how much you communicate. Just be thinking that. So these are all just initiating, and what I'll say is that, I'm not going to go in detail, but many projects are poorly initiated. So when we look at stakeholders, does our sponsor know their role? And when a sponsor tells me, and I run lots of projects still, Sponsor tells me, this is your project, I'm like, it's not my project. I would not pick this one. It's bad. It's not good. Sponsor, this is your project. I'll manage it for you. Okay, but it's not my project. It's your project. Why? Because you have authority. If you want to give me all the authority that you have, then I'll take it. So does that make sense? It's the customer's purpose, it's the sponsor's project, and it's mine to manage. I'm the third person in line. Some companies have you be the first person in line. Stay so. So each of these steps have competence to them, and that's really where my assumption is you've been trained on that, or you ought to have been trained. But that's what we need to bring to the table always. And it's not about the forms. It's about understanding how all of these flow together, and that change occurs. But I'll just say that again, many projects are poorly initiated, and then we spend time planning in a vacuum, and then the plan is never correct. So a huge piece of executing and controlling is change control. If I audit a project and there's no changes on the project, somebody lied. I mean, you can't have a project not change. I mean, if you have bosses who say, make sure there's no change, then you just got to go, no, not gonna work. It will have change. Make sense? So when we get into your personal values and ethics, we'll be thinking about that. I'll hold for a moment. Just talk to your table what you're thinking about thus far. Then I'm talking. So just spend like 2 minutes, turn around and talk. What do you know? What hand grenades or baby Ruths am I throwing in the pool? Talk about something to somebody. I don't care what Oh, I heard that. Why would you lie? But it's just not done. But sometimes, and I heard it not just once, but 2 or 3 times. Well, that's nice what you're saying, Brad, but that's not reality. And I'm like, well, what is it? Well, that's theory. And I'm like, no, it's actually, it can't be real. I'm like, yeah, but my management doesn't want to hear that. I'm like, I don't care. My job is to tell them the truth with options. Make sense? So I mean, part of, and again, I hire and fire a lot, and I fix a lot of PMOs and fix a lot of executive management. Most executive management, I'll start big workshops with executives and say, what I've been told from your people is that you don't want to hear the truth. And in every session they'll go, that's exactly correct. We don't want to hear the truth ever. I'm being sarcastic. Ask them. You want to hear the truth, or do you want to hear good news? They're like, well, I like good news. I'm like, great. Sometime you'll hear it. Yeah, we're done. But the thing is news early isn't bad news. News early is just news. So we'll get more of that in the customer. So what are your values? Because typically when you are running a team within an organization, ultimately, and this is especially, I don't want to get political in this conversation, but the U.S. has kind of lost its way, we'll say. Okay. So what are your values and do you talk about them? In some companies, these are all undiscussables because they might, make someone uncomfortable. To me, gas makes people uncomfortable, but it is what it is. But are you open? What are yours and what are your companies? Where do we sell our values out along the way? And values are what we hold dear. That's what we've got. So these are 3. Collaboration or competitiveness. I work with a number of companies where the PMs compete. And then I have piracy. Timeliness or good enough. We're close. We start meetings 10 minutes after, kind of. No, it's either on time or not. Fairness, and fairness doesn't mean equal, fairness means fair. Proactive escalation, in other words, do we raise things early with options, or do we hope? Now, how many of you, we'll talk about your friends, how many of you have friends who still have hope? How many of you just know better? Now, not having hope doesn't mean resigned. Not having hope just means I actually got matured. In other words, the tooth fairy is not going to come to a project. I always say ugly babies typically become ugly adults. Ugly projects, the best they can do is not get ugly. But the trend line says it's going to get ugly. A good quote that you won't see on these slides, but a crisis is the instantaneous end of a delusion. How many of you are creating the delusion? So I know I'm in your face today, but it's like, are we going to play to the next level? Or are we just going to go to work? I'm not a problem solver. Sometimes when we proactively ask, well, does your company reward proactive escalation, or does your company reward shooting the messenger? You've got to decide, but I'd encourage you to decide what your values are. If you're inside of a group of project managers, what are your values? And then what are our ethics? And ethics are the underpinning by which we go and strive to get our values. And there's 3 types of ethics, and again, most companies don't have these conversations anymore. So there's moral-based ethics. Moral-based ethics tend to be a right-wrong ethic. You shall not, those types of things. And we get socialized on that. Abe Lincoln, George Washington, all that. We have our myths in the U.S. Right? Honesty, the best policy, those types of things. I always run into then truth-telling. So I've got 2 teenage sons, so we're going through that model of conversation now. Okay. And so I'll look at them, and part of my background also, went to the Air Force Academy. I was their honored chairman for my senior year, so I was the judge, so I had to let people go who lied. So my son's telling me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, well, are you lying? He goes, nah. Okay, now you're lying. I mean, one, what you did was not good, but now you're lying. And then you're lying on that? Oh, dude. And he's like, I'm like, what do you think I'm most mad about? And he goes, what I did. And I'm like, no, the lie on the lie. So you gotta start looking at what's your team like. What are you like? So truth-telling gets into, well, what I told you was true. If you have that in your organization. What we told the people, but what did you not tell people? Oh, well, there's a whole nother conversation. So what's your team like? And what are you like? Then there's alignment. That's an ethic. We used to use the word integrity for that, but that word got totally abused. Alignment is where we walk the talk. We practice what we preach. We do what we say. To me, that's a huge piece of a project manager's ethic or ethos. Which of you will follow people if they do what they say? Which of you will at least not walk away from people who don't do what they say? So the less of this you have down here, the more you have hypocrisy. We're having the conversation at a whole bunch of levels here, I hope. And then you have allegiance, loyalty. So those are the 3 primary bases of ethics. And why I'm having this conversation is that we tend to, again, not have it in our teams. You know, what is the ethical stance of your team? What does your team value? So loyalty, I'll use you, Darlene, now that I know your name. Good. So Darlene and I, we've known each other 20 years, obviously. So we both lie to, our boss. But you got my back, right? Pardon? I was going to hurt you? Okay. Well, I mean, we put enough proof behind the lie. It looks good. Awesome, right?
Sure.
Yeah. We both move money from the new kids' projects. That's awesome. Yeah, we could do that.
Sure.
So are you loyal to your project? In other words, our project's always on time and on budget? Are we loyal to the company? That we're loyal to our boss, we only tell them good news? Is that loyalty? Or are we loyal to our values and ethics? So I'd just like you to think about, are you credible when you walk into the building? Are you credible with your team? And it starts here. I won't have you have that conversation, but I encourage you to go back to your team and take these slides and begin this conversation. How many of you might notice some people at work who don't have a lot of credibility? And it comes from this conversation, or the lack thereof. You know I'm being blunt today, so thank you. You may not, that's what I'm saying. I did say wait till after to applaud. You may not applaud after. So your customers, you can, and everybody's a stakeholder, but we'll go through the different sets. So what do they expect? Do they expect on time and on budget? Which means that's a poor expectation. Because you're probably not done with it if you're managing the project well. One of them's got to change. So am I going to be on the predictable time as time changes? Yes, I'm managing that project. Am I going to be on a budget that was predictable because we raised it every time when it changed? Yes, I can be on a predictable budget, but not a precise budget. Like just doesn't happen. If we want to be on a precise budget, then we move scope or quality or time or risk. Again, that pyramid has to flex. It's a mathematical equation. If one piece of the pyramid moves, one or more of the other four have to move with it. That's project management. Or are you providing value? If your customers are talking about budget and time, they're in the wrong conversation. You need to back to value. Why are we here? What are we delivering to you? How are you going to use it? If no one's pulling the deliverable towards them, I don't know why we're on this project. And that's what your job is to have somebody pull. You can push, but if you know nobody's going to receive it, this is especially for you internal people. Again, there's lots of shiny binders in lots of offices. Never get implemented. We got training though. I mean, you get a new training binder or a new hat for your project. That's awesome. Status is nice, but status just tells me where I'm at. What I really need is progress and forecast. So I would encourage you changing your status reports to progress reports. Because progress actually gives me knowledge. Status, so darling, where are you at? Well, I'm at the intersection of X and Y. Well, what does that tell me? That you're at the intersection of X or Y? Or are you ahead or behind? That's what I want to know. And if you're behind, and we guesstimated an hour 10, and it's snowing, we probably needed to change that gas. But if there's a wreck, I don't want you to say an hour 10. So forecast is, what's the future hold now that we have our trend? Make sense? I mean, so you're always telling progress, and progress is the gap between status and the plan. The wider the gap. That make sense? And this is where hope comes in. A lot of people hope their trend line changes. Trend lines are called trend lines for a reason. And typically in any phase of the project, 10 to 15% into that phase, your trend line is set. Now I know that all you know all this, but are you communicating this as your role of a PM? Because you're always educating up. Do we expect issues? Because I don't like issues. I like risks that were visible. And many times, and again, I can't train, I'd love to have a day, but I don't get a day. We often have risks and issues and action items and all this stuff strewn all over the place. But our risk register ought to be published and out there. And then some of you are in places where we can only write 3 risks on our risk register. Well, that's a happy day. What about 500 risks? Well, that's depressing. Are they there? Of course they're there. So I'd encourage you to send your risk register with your 500 risks to your sponsor. And if they go, that can't happen, you go, well, let's just go have an educational experience and walk through past projects. Do they want good news or do they want truth early? So that's, to me, always a mantra. Whenever I help a PMO or train project, it's truth early. And truth early means courage. So are we showing up with courage to tell the truth early? And then given that, if we're on the left, I'm gonna say you may not have trained your customers well, or you may have trained them really well, but not the way they need to be. So are we having the conversations on the right or on the left? I'm just encouraging you to, what are you gonna do on Monday? And then, what could you do differently? So that's my thought there. We're okay. So having like a 1-minuter at your table. Just talk to yourself. When you work with customers, and again, I work a lot with lots of customers too, is what they want is predictability, okay? Not surprises. There will always be surprises, so one of the things that you need to communicate with your sponsor is that along the way we'll be surprised. And then those are things that I'm going to come to you right away, and I don't want to get too much into the technicality of it, but a surprise is an issue. A realized risk is not an issue, it's a realized risk. So a lot of this is just education up. Anyway, but predictability doesn't mean precise. Predictability doesn't mean perfect. It's that we, as soon as we know something, we communicate it. Because again, projects occur in the future. They happen today, but it impacts the future. So with our management then, sponsors, functional managers, all them people, one, they own a whole lot more of managing a project in a matrix environment than you do. In other words, they should take way more responsibility for their role in most companies. And they don't, which is why you start having resource managers sign your schedule or approve your schedule. I use the metaphor of a boat. The project's a boat. You're the captain of that boat. If you don't own the boat, you don't own the crew. But you don't own the cargo or the destination or the journey. All you own is telling the truth along the way. But functional managers own the crew. Boats don't move without crews. And some of you are in a stressed environment, so they only give you right side rowers. But remember, we're measuring weight, so it's okay. How many of you sometimes on your project think, I think I've been here before? Yeah. So what do they expect? Again, same conversation. Do they expect on time, on budget, or do they expect quality? I can be on time and on budget, and then we'll just do it over again, but we'll rename it. Or we'll throw it to operations, and many of you share resources inside your company. Project resources and operations resources are often shared. And if I ring the doorbell and run to operations, that's how I stay on budget, then they have to fix it on their side of the house, which is never tracked. And now I have less time for them to come work on the next project. So this is the death spiral. We don't deliver quality internal. And again, we got to measure that. We got to communicate that. And we have to tell people what the ramification of poor quality is, which is different than schedule being on time and budget being on budget. Status again versus progress. So similar conversations, but pointed in different directions. One to customer, one to sponsor. Excuses, well, that didn't happen. Well, when would you know? When did you know that wasn't going to happen? Oh, a week ago. Why didn't you tell me then? Well, I didn't want to totally depress you. I was going to wait till the end of the project to actually share, because maybe I could cause you to have a stroke, and then you could forget. I don't know, what's your guys' strategy for management escalation? If we all come into the meeting at the same time, they could fall and awesome. So, are we actually coming with options and decisions as soon as we know what they are? That's project management. And many of you, I'm going to say, don't have the authority to make the decisions. How many of you are on a pure projectized project? And that would be my assumption. We don't get them in. We're in a matrix environment, and we're sharing resources with operations. And the challenge is that we often have a project portfolio and an operations portfolio, and never shall the two talk. I need a resource portfolio. Do we allow scope creep and we manage that, or do we do change control? And a huge piece, using the boat metaphor, once the project leaves the dock, we're doing change control. And projects, the more risk you have, the more uniqueness you have, the lower down you are on the priority scheme inside your organization, the more your project will change. Your projects ought to have hundreds of changes to them. Because at the end of the day, part of my job, if I'm the captain of that boat, is to show people the journey I took. And often create the myth that I went from A to B. I mean, some of you, when you're my age, we watched Gilligan's Isle, right? How did Ginger pack that much? That's one, okay? But two, it was like a 3-hour tour. And then some of us, when we were kids, we actually read. So remember the Odyssey, Ulysses? How long was it supposed to take? 3 months. 26 years later, he came home. How many of you are on that project? You know, so when we get to lessons learned, I'd just like you to think through what lessons are you sharing with people. So how well have you trained your management? How well and you train your management every day. And the more you're on the left side, I'm just going to say the more you're creating an illusion. The challenge for many of us, you asked me about lying. When you're the first person to go back and start managing, being project manager well, a couple things could happen. One is the early Christians got the best lions. The lions were really hungry, so they'll just kill you quick. So it's all good. It's better being played with. Right? The other is you might be called the first liar because everybody else has been doing that. And in which case we get to go and change how we want to manage ourselves. Okay? Again, it takes courage. So again, what are you going to do tomorrow or Monday? And there we go, that word. If everything was an easy decision, it wouldn't require courage. My peers, if you were all my peers inside of a PMO, what do you expect? What should I share with you? I should have skills. I should know what I'm doing. I should be able to collaborate versus compete. If a surprise happens, I'll go with you, darling, again. So, darling, I get surprised. Damn, that hurt. But I don't tell anyone because I'm embarrassed, because I should know. How many of you are in a company where project manager is the smartest person in the room? Or supposed to be? And all you need to be smart enough to know is that you're not. Okay? But I got surprised, but I don't tell you, and then you get surprised, but I feel better. Okay. And then, so, that hurt, didn't it? Yeah, sorry. But I'm glad you're with me. I feel better. You know, Drew's going to enter that phase of his project next week. Should we tell him? I don't think so. I think he needs to learn the way we learn. Yeah. So how many of you learn that way? Okay. I mean, those young folks, we'll get some lines on their eyes. Okay. We'll get them all real quick. So, do I actually collaborate and share or not? Do I adhere to the process or am I special? And if the process doesn't work, fix the process. Not go around the process. And to me, we tend to, in this project management world, add way too much process, which gets in the way of telling the truth early. If I can't run a project with Post-its, I can't run it with 50 forms. Knowledge sharing, again, do I share surprises? Do I share risks? Do I share my bag of tricks, or do I keep my bag of tricks close? How do you give somebody who's 20 years of experience without having them wait 20 years? That's half your job as a project manager, is to share the journey. So, you know, how have you trained your peers? Have you trained them that you're heroic? Let's go back for a moment for management. I always like to go into companies and read like the project of the quarter, the newsletter. Maybe you have one of those newsletters. If you don't, that's fine too. Because usually in the newsletter, it was, it was a dark and stormy night. Brad was the PM, and we got caught in a hurricane, terrible winds, lightning struck the ship, it caught on fire. So Brad grabbed Drew, he grabbed Darlene, and we swam. grabbed the gold, and as we swam, the sharks ate me, but Drew took over, and he made it just to the shore before he died, but you made it, and then the clouds opened, and the sun shone, and there was a rainbow. We were under budget. That's an awesome project, isn't it? We should emulate that. How many of you have that project as the standard? We should, like, our projects of the quarter should be boring. We planned, we did our risk register, life happened, we changed the project, all our stakeholders knew about it. It was predictable along the way. We delivered quality that was used after the fact. Oh man, that's kind of boring. That's what we want to copy.
The guy who runs our IT operation and he goes, he has a boring report.
Yep.
It's just quarterly, and he's too much.
Yep. We want more boring. And boring doesn't mean
I
like,
want him to be on a boring project.
well, he'll never be on boring. I used the wrong word.
No, that's exactly.
Oh,
what
is it?
It's
Yeah.
called the boring.
Right. That'll work.
It bores him, he loves it.
So anyway, how have you trained your peers? So how many of you, again, are in competition with one another inside? How many of us are pirates? How many of us steal the best people? Or when we're assigned them anyway, we don't use them, we just go around? How many of you are people who, you know, in companies who actually track effort? Lots of internal companies don't track effort back to jobs. So now we take our best people and overuse them. In which case, we're doing what's called negative reinforcement. We're telling our worst people, just don't work hard and you'll never have to. The other thing is, I mean, when I was young, my kid was younger, he was 3 years old, he would help me take the trash out, in the morning. He does now, he's a teenager. But, I've got a 200-foot driveway, and it would take half an hour to take the trash out. And I'd come back inside, and my wife would say, what are you doing? I'm like, taking the trash out. She's like, took you half an hour? Yep, that helped. So how many of you have help on your projects? And then when you have help on your projects, how many of you go, you know what? It's just best you sit quietly. I'll do your work too. Whole bunch of stuff that goes in on that. Okay, so again, what are you going to do different next week with your peers? And then we'll talk, and I'll just say professionalism is what you need to play. Okay, some of you are probably certified, and that word actually means something. Used to anyway. With my teams, again, do they expect purpose, passion? Purpose doesn't mean that I'm going to take responsibility for everything. It just means I understand the purpose and I have a purpose. And my purpose is to, one, achieve the purpose of the project and to manage truthfully. But I mean, do you show up with purpose? Are you acting like the captain of the ship? Or are you just wandering in? Do you have passion? Do you have quality standards that are binary? In other words, it either meets the standard or it doesn't. If it doesn't meet the standard, one, I'm going to call it out. Two, we're going to go fix it. If you don't know how to fix it, then I'll go to your manager and we'll figure out how to go fix it. But the moment I fix it for them, set up a whole nasty process. Consistency. How many of you have worked with managers, leaders who are consistent? How many of you sometimes didn't like them, but you knew where they were going to be? Maybe you've worked with people who are inconsistent. Same. So again, I run big projects. I work with lots of companies. How many of you like to be liked? We're human beings. We like to be liked. How many of you know people? Sorry, I've only met you for an hour. Can't do that direct. How many of you know people who like to be liked? Project managers who like to be liked, they might as well make scope creep their delay. If you like to be liked, buy a dog. They'll like you no matter what. But when you're a PM, it's not my job to be liked. It's to be respected. Due to that professionalism. Am I confident? Confident is very different than arrogance. Again, we won't go with that. But do I also make decisions? And I'll just say, in the U.S. now, we're in a decision-averse world right now. The word accountability has taken over a whole bunch of stuff, which basically means who are we going to blame? And and it's usually the wrong person. So now we just have decision-free zones, because no one wants to step up to it. When we get back to issues, again, I don't have that much time, issues logs are all up and out. Issues logs are never on the boat, they're about everybody else. And boss, if you don't want to make that decision, then you give it back to me and I will. So in my issues log, there's always a column that says, if you choose not to decide, this is what I get to decide. You abdicated your authority, I'm going to take it. Why? Because I need to run this project. Do they want protection? And protection means I'm not going to throw them under the bus. Protection is very different than coddling. Protection is very different than enabling. But I'm going to be the first person to take the stuff. Okay? And then do I give them opportunities to grow? Did they leave my project in a better place than they came? Or did I just suck all the blood out of it? But what is their growth path? How do they see that along the way? Am I having conversations with their bosses throughout? Do I acknowledge? And again, we're talking, it's basically parenting to some regard. But you need to learn how to say thank you at least 10 times a day. And that's just needs to be a practice. What we tend to do is not say anything about anything. But you acknowledge that behavior that you want to keep, and you call out the behavior that you don't. When we don't say anything about anything, I know you have people at work who look around and go, they don't do squat, and nobody tells them anything. They just come to me with their work. And not your organization, we're talking about other places. Okay. And then do they feel a sense of contribution? They feel a sense of contribution when they can tie their activities to the purpose of the project. When it's about time and budget, they're not contributing. Make sense? It's like you've always got to reference that. So again, how do you train your teams? And what can you do with them? So I'm going to give you time to do questions and answers. But they just want trust, if that makes sense. Trust doesn't mean liking people. Again, it doesn't mean disliking people either, but it's just another conversation. But they trust me because I'm consistent. They know my ethics, my values. They know their ethics and their values. They know predictability. They know I've got their back, which is different than enabling or So what I'd like you to think about, what are you going to take to do tomorrow? Not tomorrow, but hopefully you'll think tomorrow. Hopefully you'll think later today. Because this stuff works when you do it. It's a baby step, but it's like some of you got 20, 30 years left in your career. What are you going to start on? So with your skills, what are you going to do with your customers, with your management, and with your peers, with your team, and with yourself? Because a lot of this starts with you. And I'll just say I've been on a 35-year journey running projects and consulting, and I used to be a hero martyr when I had hair, and in my 20s, because it was just adrenaline-based junkie. But then I learned I had some great teachers, but I also learned that every day I'm training up. I needed to shift that. So I want to thank you, but let's go back to this word. I'd just like you to think about when you go to work, do people see you as a person of integrity? And integrity is walking the talk, or do they see you as a person of hypocrisy? That's your choice to make. So with that, I'm going to say thanks. Now you can talk to your table at all. Any questions for me? And I know we've got like 5 minutes. We can do we want camera off so you can ask me questions?